definitely harder to manage that smaller budget. You have to be so strategic with every cent. Like if you think about it, a single click can cost you upwards of $25, $50. That could be a large portion of your monthly budget on a certain channel. So for me, you have to be really in the weeds a bit more when it comes to these smaller budgets to take advantage of every single dollar, as opposed to on these larger budgets using the AI a bit more to help inform how the campaign performs. So you have so much more data to inform that machine learning and to really see the outputs and the opportunity that that machine learning brings. The evolution of Google, even since I was in grad school, the Google Ad Suite I learned in that program is entirely different than the Google Suite that exists now. It's just so dynamic. It continues to change.
All right. I'm here with Melissa Morris, fairly new addition to the Digible team. She's come in as a paid media manager for us in our paid media department, and has what I think is one of the better, more diverse backgrounds that we have here at Digible within her respective domain. So I'll let her share a little bit more about that. But really, this is a continuation. We've just kind of been kicking this off, Melissa, as far as our agency services series, I guess. And so we're kind of going to different spots within Digible and doing deeper dives, and not for Digible's sake, but really just for our listeners, is they're curious to hear more about what's going on with paid search, paid media, in your case, or SEO, social, et cetera, and the like. So before we dive into it, why don't you share a little bit more on your background, and then we can get into the fun stuff.
Yeah, of course. So I actually came into paid media a bit later in life. It was a secondary career for me. So my first role was actually in multifamily. It was with these smaller budgets and managing and really learning the ins and outs of paid search, PPC, how to optimize before really AI came into the space and machine learning did. From there, I moved to a bit of a larger...
You have to pause. I'm going to... this is typical. I usually interrupt within the first 30 seconds, so I got to uphold my standard. Lots of people stumble into, I'll put it that way, multifamily. Many don't end up then leaving. I want to hear your story real quick, since you mentioned that you started. How did you end up in multifamily? And then I think I do know a little bit more about what ended up with the transition out and now back. But yeah, first just let us know, how did you even end up in multifamily?
Yeah, for sure. So I actually thought I would go into the creative side of marketing. I think like most millennials do when they go into a marketing program, they see the luxurious side of it, the exciting side. Not that paid media is not, but it's just not seen that way. And I actually ended up competing in a few competitions within grad school, all around data analytics and data storytelling, data insights. And so from there, I started looking for positions and roles. I am originally from Texas and kind of wanted to venture out. And with that, I actually found a role at one of Digible's competitors, and I was there for about a year and a half, 2 years, and that's really, I wanted to be in Denver, and that's where I came to. It was a really great way to learn hands-on, to have a lot of access to a large amount of accounts that you're working through, and really be able to test and pull a bunch of levers from there. But yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. When it looked to pivot, I think I was looking for an opportunity to expand my horizon within paid media and move outside of just search and paid search itself. So I moved into more of the entire Google suite, or what I do still call as paid search, but it includes display, it includes DemandGen, it includes discovery when that was really a thing, now kind of pivoting towards DemandGen. Performance Max, and kind of expanding into those alternative channels within the Google Suite, and then also YouTube and video action campaigns. And so with that, I moved to that bigger agency. I worked on a tech client, so a major tech client within the app space, and was able to have a little bit more money to play with when it came to testing and expanding and learning about a lot of that machine learning within paid media and how those two things kind of come together. So that's really where I went to.
And I know you can't share who this client was. She's sworn to secrecy here, but can you enlighten us a little bit on what the delta on those budgets were?
Yeah, I would definitely say
not a small difference, right?
No, it's well over like 100 times what I was spending originally. So it's anywhere from like very small budgets, like under $1,000, to very, very large budgets on a quarterly basis. So the measurement isn't one-to-one, but it definitely is very different.
And fundamentally, would you say, and you're kind of back in it, but you're managing a team, of course, now, more difficult or less difficult to work with a $100,000 plus budget versus a $2,000 budget? Because they both come with challenges.
Yeah, I feel it's definitely harder to manage that smaller budget. You have to be so strategic with every cent. Like if you think about it, a single click can cost you upwards of $25, $50. That could be a large portion of your monthly budget on a certain channel. So for me, you have to be really in the weeds a bit more when it comes to these smaller budgets to take advantage of every single dollar, as opposed to on these larger budgets using the AI a bit more to help inform how the campaign performs. So you have so much more data to inform that machine learning and to really see the outputs and the opportunity that machine learning brings. Not to say that doesn't benefit these smaller accounts. You just have to be really strategic in how you're allocating those dollars.
Makes a ton of sense. And we'll come back more to some of those challenges. So I'm going to ask you to take us all the way to Digible. So from the ad tech, well, you were managing those campaigns. So, what was the next stop? Because nonprofit's in here somewhere, right?
Yeah, so I did go into nonprofit afterwards. So I moved over to an agency that was solely focused on fundraising for nonprofits, and that's where I was. I was an associate director working on a handful of international aid organizations and also working with some domestic aid too here in the U.S. So that was a major perk of that. My first career out of school was in non-for-profit space, so I was doing Title I advising for high school students in Title I high schools. So really brought it back to like what I wanted to do in my undergrad and why I wanted to go to college was to be able to give back in some way, shape, or form. So it was really cool to see the melding of that like corporate mindset, the kind of like corporate flow I'd gone into, and how that can meet with the non-for-profit space.
Totally. That's awesome. All right. So then when Digible?
Yeah. So I had actually been seeing Digible for a long time. Obviously, I have been in Denver. The marketing world here is very small. The agency world is very small. So I knew a handful of people who had worked here in the past. And really what brought me to Digible was this role specifically. I was really wanting to move more into people management and spending the majority of my time doing that, which Digible is very unique in that its managers really do spend most of their time managing folks. And yes, we are hands on keys at some point, but really we do that in developing our team members and really pushing growth out to the rest of the team. And so that was something that I was really excited about, is going back into that mentoring space and being able to spend more time doing that. I saw the position open up. I had actually interviewed for Digible a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, was offered a role, but it wasn't a management role. So I went a different way. But I was really excited to come back. I reached out to the recruiter I'd worked with before and kind of was relentless in not giving it up, and was basically like, I really want to be considered for this role. I'd like to put my name in the rank for it. So, and thankfully it worked out. So
yes.
Here I
am. I will echo the enthusiasm, I guess, of it working out, because you've been such a great addition. Heard great things from the people that you're managing, as well as Jenny, our paid media director, and yeah, just thrilled that you're bringing your insights, your maturity, your diversity, and also your character. Not that everybody that's in nonprofit has great character, but it's usually a good sign.
Thank you. That's kind.
And how you think about life. Let's now dive more into the weeds. One of the things that stood out for me in our first kind of coffee or conversation was just the way that you seem to be inherently almost rethinking, unlearning. So it's not the first time this has been brought up on the podcast, but I'm stealing shamelessly from Adam Grant in his book, Think Again. We did at our Digible Summit 2-3 years ago, we actually themed the whole thing, unlearning and rethinking. And it was super interesting to hear different perspectives of different realms within marketing and multifamily, like whether it's websites, whether it's AI leasing agents, whether it's paid media, whether it's ILSs. There's just so much that has been slow to move. I think it's fair to say it's a common kind of stigma about this industry is it's a little bit behind. But what's changed, and this is me trying to tee you up, but it in many ways is AI. It's forced, and how fast it's coming now, people to get a little bit more uncomfortable and be prepared to think differently about their jobs and performance. So you said you don't think anymore as much in terms of paid search, but more in that suite of Google products, and more recently DemandGen and PMAX. So if you don't mind, because not everybody is, in fact, most probably aren't anywhere near as versed as you are, can you define a little bit what that Google suite looks like now, how much AI is driving it versus somebody with hands-on keyboard? And then we'll talk about some of, I'll call them the hot takes, but some other areas of multifamily and paid media that you think we should be perhaps unlearning a little bit or rethinking.
Yeah, definitely. So when you look at the evolution of Google, even since I was in grad school, which was back in like late 2018, 2019, the Google Ad Suite I learned in that program is entirely different than the Google Suite that exists now. It's just so dynamic. It continues to change, and it's always used machine learning in some case, but with the prevalence of ChatGPT and OpenAI and kind of that moving into the mainstream, you see the machine learning within the Google Suite getting smarter and smarter. But also on top of that, you have to look at the major contributors here, which are like Apple and Google, being those people who are actually coming in and really putting data security at the forefront too. So trying to pull away some of the access that you have to these individual levers due to data security. So really just trying to meet consumer needs, which isn't a bad thing by any means. I really think it's great for the safety of consumers' data and really knowing and kind of bringing that to the forefront of conversation among people. But it does pose a challenge for marketers, right? All these levers that we've been able to pull in the past and had access to maybe are moving behind a little bit of a black box within the Google space. And so the biggest thing that I've always done when approaching these new campaign types is there's one way to look at it of saying Google's pushing us to use their AI and their automation, spend more money on their platform, which could be partially true, but at the same time, you're also looking at how can I make this machine learning work for me and work for my purpose, because that is the direction of paid media as a whole. It's not just Google. It's not just Meta that's moving that way. It's everyone's moving to some sort of machine learning. And the goal there is really to make the campaign smarter based on the data that you're feeding it. And so how can we look at the data we have, the quantity that we have to feed that machine learning and make these campaigns and campaign types and the evolution work for our end goal and work for our clients? That's really the biggest thing that I see is how can we move it forward and feed it all the information that it needs to and use that AI leverage, that machine learning leverage to benefit our clients in long run.
Yeah. Well, the data sticks out in, a few things that you said, but I personally, and I don't think I'm on an island here, believe that data is going to be one of the biggest difference makers, I'll say, in results or campaign performance moving forward. Not to say that it wasn't in the past, but as you said, if things are becoming a little more black box, more AI driven, it is so reliant on the fidelity, the quantity of the data, the recency, et cetera, that's driving it. So, but what really I want to lean into a little bit is how do you reconcile? What is some of your advice? How do we handle those restrictions? So there has been multiple lawsuits in this industry pointed at fair housing, data privacy issues, all those things that you were referring to. And yet the expectation, and this is understandable from many of our clients and in this industry, is that we're going to improve the quality of leads. Like with all this technology, surely that's just going to get better and better. But at the very same time, you're seeing, cookieless world, right? So just the ability to track, much less the targeting, all those things are getting, in many ways, pulled back,
Right.
right? To, I don't want to say 2017 or 18, since you said that's when you started, but so how do we, or you, advise in managing that, where it's like, yes, I know you want better leads and we have all this new data and technology, but we're also facing very serious challenges as far as capabilities. So yeah, just talk us through that. What's the advice?
Yeah, when I look at that, I mean, there's definitely a full funnel approach here, right? So you're looking at top of funnel, how are we reaching out to highly qualified people? And that to me is where that machine learning comes into play. Google's going to have those signals. And although we may not have access to all the specific levers we did before, Google still has that data, that proprietary data that they allow us to utilize, but it's masked within this AI space. So it's how do we use the campaign types, looking at like performance max, demand gen, search, all the way down to display to create an entire full funnel approach and get that prospecting, get those new people access to the brand awareness to create that demand, and then pulling in more of that proprietary data from our clients and saying, okay, here are some of your website visitors. We can use that data. You have cookie consent on your website that allows us to retarget those folks. And then in the long run, do we look at testing some other opportunities of, and this is like big thinking down the line, but lead to lease options and saying, okay, maybe we use offline uploading of proprietary data to optimize based off of consumers that are going from a lead all the way to a lease. How do we make that algorithm smarter to reach those people that are more likely to be not only a qualified lead, but a lead that converts and becomes revenue for the overall program? So that's really the way that I look at it is, what levers, yes, does Google have, but what do we have that we can feed in to this machine learning to make that algorithm smarter and to make it work for us?
Totally. How difficult is it to, I guess, introduce new data sets to Google? So I think I'm trying to get at many of our marketers and probably operators in this industry don't realize the data they're sitting on, or that it could be leveraged the way you're describing. I think most now are, I don't know if expecting, but aren't surprised that we're incorporating PMS, property management system data or CRM data into the campaigns and better informing them that way. But if there was some other data set, and I'm going to use, call analytics, which, we've built our own platform, but how easily it is to integrate, third party, but still first party, if you're following me, but just, campaign data into the campaigns.
Yeah.
That was a little jumbled, but do you get the question?
Totally understand.
How easy is it? It's like, oh, that's a really interesting data set. I'd like to incorporate that and help, might that drive better results in my campaign?
Yeah.
Is that a difficult process? Is it do you need an engineer to do that?
No engineer is needed, really. I would say it comes down to adhering to that fair housing rules there and making sure that you have a secure data transfer process. So that's an SFTP process to make sure that the data is staying secure and staying in the hands of the people that it needs to, right? So it's really about evaluating your consent and consent policies within folks submitting leads. So making sure you have all of the necessary warnings and information on your website so that people are informed of what you are going to do with their data and how you will utilize it. But on top of that, making sure you take the extra step to keep that data secure. And with that, there are plenty of processes in place to have that secure data transfer to then be uploaded directly into the Google Suite and to be optimized based off of, we don't even have to see that or have it on our computers in any way, shape, or form. So it just allows us to have that lever to be able to feed the algorithm, and then it stays secure within that space.
Super encouraging. Part two of that, I guess the follow-up would be, if you were to bring in a new data set, how would you advise measuring the impact of that? So do you have in your head kind of a rubric or formula where it's like, I'd want at least 6 months on 10 properties, or is it something that you could measure much sooner? So I'm just trying to get a little bit at, timeline, and because there's so many variables, right, that go into a campaign's performance. And I think that seems like it'd be one of the harder things to know, did that new data really move the needle? Exactly.
Yeah. So I would say the more data, the better, honestly. That's going to be any data person's answer to you, though. The longer look back you have definitely makes the most sense. However, it's also very specific to your business. So if you are really looking at, especially multifamily, looking back 6 months, that's generally when you start to see people starting to look for a new place, right? A new apartment, a new rental for them. And so, yes, you may be able to use annual data to say, like, a year ago, these people were looking. Maybe they're not satisfied with where they are. Do we continue to retarget those folks? I think really what it comes down to is looking at your internal team and analyzing the lifetime value of your consumer. Do you need, what users are most valuable to you based on the data that you're seeing internally, which we are definitely able to advise on and provide guidance on, but it's more, I think it's on a case-by-case and industry-based. That's not a satisfactory answer, but I do think it's accurate.
Yeah, totally. What about the copy and keywords? So there's, the targeting, but obviously a big part of what drives performance also is what kind of creative and copy are you using? How do you think about that? What advice would you give to marketers that are listening to this and interesting on how to better leverage or think about the content and the keyword strategy?
Yeah. So when we're looking at, I think those are two separate things. When we're looking at keywords, we definitely want to bring in qualified people, right? So definitely like casting a net to hit all of the relevant searches for you, but also I think what's more strategic there is how you're using negative keywords to filter out unqualified searches, especially in these smaller budgets. What we're looking at here is, are we getting a lot of searches which we may think are qualified, but they're not converting and they're eating up a lot of our budget? How are we being strategic to add those negative keywords to filter that traffic appropriately? With the evolution of broad match keywords and AI learning within broad match keywords on Google, you're seeing a lot more of exploration and using more broad match terms, which can be really beneficial because it allows Google to take a wider look at what the intent of a search is. And so you can see a lot of great searches coming through that you maybe would not have captured otherwise. But what really makes it a quality search is we're able to add those negative keywords in to refine that broad match, because that's going to cast a wide net, which could quickly eat through quite a bit of your budget, especially with the smaller budgets that we're working with on a monthly basis. And so that's kind of how we approach that keyword strategy piece. Is we want to look at the phrase and exact match that are really high intent, and getting a lot of those users in. And then when we're looking at opening up and testing broad match, it is scaling that testing, right? We're not going to be irresponsible with the ad dollars that our clients are giving us. We want to be good stewards of those and make sure we're spending those correctly. And so we're really looking at being incremental in the way that we test. We want to validate. We want to get actionable insights and really things that we can apply to a greater portfolio to say, this worked, and this is why it worked, and this is how it worked. And this is what we're doing to mitigate any possible errant searches or scaling that could be coming through, and that's through that negative keyword strategy.
Makes sense. Real quick, for those that aren't as familiar again with paid search, can you quickly share or define what is broad match, exact match, negative keywords? So some of the basic terminology you were just, I'll say basic, but I think it's more
if
like...
if you're not in the space, it probably
it's like a 301 or 302. I don't know where that is on the curriculum, but...
So there are 3 different types of match types when you implement a search campaign. And so search campaigns are solely around keyword searches that are happening within Google on the Google Ads platform and Bing on the Microsoft Ads platform. So what it does is exact will match exactly to what you put in. So basically, if you put in apartments for rent near me, the person has to search exactly apartments for rent near me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're looking at phrase match, that can give you more the general same idea, or it can pull in specific words that are a part of the search term that you put in. So apartments for rent near me could also match to like flat near me for rent, something along those lines. So similar concept, similar idea, but same like general message. Broad match allows the overall intent to come into play, so it can match to quite a wider variation of things. So it definitely opens up those floodgates a bit more, which is why those negative keywords, which are essentially keywords that you add to the account that you don't want your ad to trigger for. So if someone searches, say, trying to think of a good example, like a neighborhood that you are not a part of and you want to add that as like a negative keyword, then it won't trigger for that.
Because you're 20 miles away.
Yeah. So say like you're in Austin, but someone's looking to relocate to Texas and they search Dallas apartment. That negative keyword Dallas is going to make sure that that doesn't show up. So you're just not getting
Wasting
traffic
money.
that's not looking for what you're providing or what you're offering.
Yep. So to play that back really quickly, thinking almost like Maslow's hierarchy, but maybe it's even simpler. It's exact at the bottom, then phrase, then broad.
Yeah. So if you're
Any
going
that we're missing there?
Yeah. If you're going wide to narrow, it's going to be broad, phrase, exact. So wide to narrow.
Got it. Let's pivot a little towards attribution and how much, I guess, you can, or you would say many agencies rely on Google, like their suite, versus some of this other data that we're referring to. So PMS, because what we often hear, and it's a fair, I guess, I don't know if I call it expectation, but goal is the matchback. It's like more and more owners and marketers are like, in this day and age, can't we do better with attribution? I have a whole rant about that, so I'm going to stay away from that. It's been probably aired too much on this podcast, but how are you thinking about attribution on these campaigns? What are some of the biggest challenges? And if you want to share maybe the other side of that, which is opportunities, but yeah, little color around attribution.
So there's a couple ways that you can go about looking at attribution within the platform. They have multiple models, but generally speaking, I would say I favor towards a data-driven attribution model, which basically allocates a percentage of a lead or conversion. So if we're getting down to like brass tacks across any industry, it allocates any portion of conversion to a specific interaction with your audience. So say we have a touch point on Meta, and then they also get served a display ad, and then they search the brand name, and then they convert on that final search. So it's going to give you, Meta's going to get a small piece of it, the display will get a small piece, and then that final search where they actually completed the lead form will get probably most of that attribution. So it kind of goes through the model of every single touch point. So it allows you to see a full funnel approach and how everything is interacting with each other, versus some of the other models are first click versus last click. So it either gives all of the conversion to the first click, so the first interaction they had, or the last click. I would say most advertisers are moving towards that data driven. It allows you to see the wider picture. It allows you to see how your channel mix works together. But on top of that, when you're looking in the individual platforms, and this makes it a bit more convoluted, you will see Meta's going to give itself a lot of credit. Google's going to give itself a lot of credit, and Bing's going to give itself a lot of credit. And so what other, I guess, outside analytic platforms like Adobe Analytics or GA4 are doing is kind of bringing all of those touch points together. I would say directionally, all of that data should be the same. And so when you're looking at data, you shouldn't see huge swings between what that data looks like. So it should be generally moving in the same direction. And that's how I evaluate data and attribution there. You can also look at more of that offline uploading, which I know I mentioned before, which is proprietary data. So it allows you to compare it not only to what you're seeing in these platforms like Google Analytics and Google Ads, but it also allows you to see what is really coming into the fold on the back end within your system. So you can do an offline upload of leads. You can do an offline upload of lead to leases. So we can actually optimize towards those like lease numbers as well. down the line, if you're really looking for a greater return and you want to optimize towards maybe shorter leases or longer leases, depending on what that margin looks like for you, then you can add in revenue as well. That's like definitely a larger pipe dream, but it's something that I think would really benefit the overall programs that we're running, especially knowing that they do have those specialized smart bidding types, which allow you to optimize to revenue. It allows you to optimize to conversion value or maximizing total leads as well. So then you can do a lot with strategy at that point.
How much of I'll call it a hurdle or impediment is the volume of data? So we in multifamily often see, as you're saying, smaller budgets than maybe the big retailers or ad tech companies, bigger brands, if you will. And so that's a challenge. But when you are talking about some of these other options, is there enough volume for like on a property website for you to really leverage some of those enhancements, I'll say?
No, I think that's an entirely valid question. It's something to think about too. And I know in our original conversations, we did talk about, doing the individual property advertising, but is there also a benefit to doing a wider advertising for regions or wider advertising for the entire brand name to see what type and amount of data can you leverage to get the best results for you, and kind of jumping into what revolutionary or evolutionary strategy can we drive to continue to push these programs forward, and what's a way we can think outside of the box to see how can we deliver more based on the data that we have. Yeah.
I want to transition or maybe just segue to PMAX, DemandGen. As you were talking about, and I'm using attribution as the segue here, but when Google first released both of those products, I think, but correct me if I'm wrong, it was truly a black box. We weren't really seeing a whole lot. It was more just trust the AI. And it sounds like some of that's the curtains being pulled back a little bit so that we have a better understanding of where these impressions are falling. But first, if you can, again, just simply define DemandGen and PMAX for our listeners so they know what we're talking about. And then let me know what you think about these, I'll call them products, but the evolution of this product suite or Google suite, and how to best utilize those. Are there already some clear best practices that are forming with DemandGen and PMAX?
Yeah, definitely. So when you think about those two, they are running across...
Well, first define.
Yes. So when you're thinking about Performance Max and DemandGen, both campaign types run across multiple types of inventory within Google. Now, when you look at Google campaign types, search is only standardly going to run on the search inventory, which Google owns and operates. Now you can expand that into display inventory and then also search partners inventory, which is partner websites that work with Google, but they don't own them. And so there is opportunity to expand there. But if you think about it, whenever you're on a website and you see a text ad in a display place, how likely are you to click on that? So when you're looking at the evolution of DemandGen and PMAX, those allow us to feed in to a specific campaign a search ad, a display ad, and a video ad all at the same time. And then it allows the algorithm to say, this person searching for or in this interest network is going to respond best to a video ad. So we're going to put that video ad in front of them, and they're going to be more likely to click on it. So they're going to look at their user behavior based on the cookies that they have and mapping back to their device ID or user ID, just depending on if they're on a phone or on a computer. So that just gives you that opportunity. When we're looking at a full funnel approach, I would say DemandGen is going to be far closer to like a display heavy, a discovery type of campaign, which is going to look a little more native. It's also going to have more options for video placements. And so I would put that more at top of funnel for an awareness piece. You'll have lower CPM costs as well. So you'll be charged on cost per 1,000 views. And so it allows you to see or get your message out there and bring that brand awareness and engage those users, bring them to your site to then retarget them in either a display campaign or a search campaign or anywhere down funnel in that consideration or conversion space. I think PMAX lives in the interim space, right? So it depends on what conversion you're actually looking for. When it comes to lead gen, we can definitely see increased like bot activity within PMAX. And so we work with our partners to make sure that we're putting in recaptcha and other things on their website to limit that influence, and doing our best due diligence to make sure we're bringing in high quality leads there as well. But it's also going to be pretty heavily on display and video placements. The great thing about PMAX is we have far more visibility into what is happening on PMAX these days than we did when it was first rolled out in 2021, 2020-ish. And so there's just so much more access to placement types, placement lists. We can see the distribution of spend across video placements like on YouTube channels versus app placements versus search placements. We can see what's on Google owned and operated versus not. So it allows us to really be more aware of the distribution and see how it's interacting with our search campaigns as well. On top of that, I think...
Well, let me pause for a second there. Is there some clear trends or best practices that now that you're seeing more, as you're saying, when it was first released, there wasn't a lot to learn. What have you learned? What are we learning? One of the things that I think I heard from Jenny was that about 40% of the impressions within PMAX were search impressions, which to me is pretty powerful potentially. If this is if this is Google's AI, it is very clearly telling you not to put all of your money in search.
Yeah.
It's so I don't know if you'd agree that is one of the clear learnings here, is that or validating points maybe, but you were about to answer. So yeah, what are you taking away from some of these insights now that you're seeing from PMAX?
Yeah, I would say generally speaking, I have seen that distribution among many of my clients when I've been looking more at like the placement distribution. So seeing around 40 to 50%, closer to 40 on search and the rest on the display or video placement. And so, yes, that's definitely saying that Google is pushing some additional volume into those more higher or upper funnel awareness levels. I think it really does help feed into that full funnel approach and making sure we're feeding demand and pushing those folks through into the consideration and then conversion phase of the funnel. You can't really continue to see conversions come through if you're not pushing that awareness level. So I do think there is some validity to that. However, if you're looking, also we're running search on top of it. And so when you put two different campaign types in the same account, they're never going to compete with each other at an auction. So Google's going to put whatever campaign type it's think is going to convert into the auction at the same time. So that's the other benefit here, is that you are able to still grab those down funnel users with those search campaigns that you have that are very pointed, that have those keywords that you're really searching for, while Performance Max can use search themes and you can add negative placements and negative terms to it. However, it's going to be more of that like interest-based and trying to reach those users that are interested in your products based on interest audience or custom intent audiences that you build out with your search ads. So there's a couple different things that come into play here. I don't think they can exist without the other. So I definitely think PMAX is evolving and we're learning more and more about it. I think it's going to be an integral part of search and paid media moving forward. And AI and machine learning is not going away. And so it's really, how do you make that campaign type work in tandem with the search campaigns that you're running, which have historically been bread and butter, that have really brought in high quality leads, high quality people to your site based on those intents. And how do we make sure that we're funneling quality people at the top all the way down into those search campaigns?
So is there for you yet a almost default starting point between DemandGen, PMAX, and I suppose you may say that's not the way I think about it, but like search specifically, because it feels like that's kind of what we're looking at right now, instead of 5 or 6 different, kind of linear platforms or channels that you're managing. Google has removed that in a good way. It's like, to your point, you have all these different formats, types of ads that you can now put into PMAX or DemandGen, and search seems to be the one that's still standing alone, or can or should. So where I'm going with this though is if you had a lease up, it's like, okay, you're running with a $4,000 budget for, I'm going to say, paid media. Are you at a point where it's like, yeah, default on a lease up would be 40% of that budget I'm going to put in PMAX, 30% I'm going to put in DemandGen, 20%, I don't know if that added up.
I gotcha.
But yeah, or is each property, when you get that budget, I got to do some work before I settle on what my starting kind of allocation is?
Yeah, trying to think about the best way I would phrase this. It's like if you're doing a lease up that's a new build, new brand, entirely new, you're going to need some of that top of funnel. There's no way that you can continue to develop that demand without having some awareness. Now, do I think 40% of your budget needs to go to that? Maybe not, because the CPMs are lower. You can get more of that awareness piece there and get your name in front of more folks on Meta and display and PMAX and DemandGen. And then really where you start to see more competitive, higher pricing in search, it's like, yeah, we definitely need to be spending a little bit more money there because those users are so high intent, and they're really far down in that funnel and that consideration and in that conversion phase. So you're really looking at where can I grab them while they're actively interested and while they're actively looking. So that's where I would recommend spending more of your money is in that high intent, but you can't do it without having the awareness piece there too. So I wouldn't say there's like a blanket 30% on awareness, 70% on consideration and conversion. I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I think it's definitely dynamic. We need to be looking at what's going on in the market, what's more expensive. Are we seeing an increase in cost in search due to seasonality? And I think we talked about this at one point too in some of our conversations, but during the summer when we have high peak leasing seasons, we're going to see those competition in our keywords and those prices spike up. So how are we looking at allocating budgets year round? Is there a benefit to taking a wider step back and saying, okay, this is when we need to spend the bulk of our money because it's more expensive and this is when we see most of our revenue come in. So let's look at how we're allocating the budget throughout the year as opposed to on a month-to-month basis. Is that feasible? Is that reasonable? I'm not sure. I think that's like a business decision for our clients, but it's definitely something to look at testing and seeing, is that valuable to maybe spend less during the high competition season in the fall where you see Black Friday come through, you see Cyber Monday, you see Thanksgiving, and then all of the holiday sales that come through that are going to make November and December so expensive in the marketplace, even if they're not searching for our specific terms. It's going to make those display placement costs rise up. It's going to make all the video placement costs rise up too. So really being more strategic about how we're allocating budget year round. And
I want to wrap up this session with you because I feel like we got to have 10 more. So I got to stop somewhere. But I want to just hit a couple of like either hot takes or things you think we need to be rethinking in this industry related to paid media strategy. But before we do, I want to ask just staying on this thread of PMAX, DemandGen, search, and you're saying there isn't really a formula per se that you would be advocating. There's too many variables. I hope I'm summarizing properly. But how soon before you would optimize or would expect an agency or paid media strategist to make some changes? So let's just pretend for the sake of it that you put 40% of the budget into PMAX. I'm going to end up blowing this math again, but 30% into DemandGen and the rest I'll say into search. Would you say after the first month you would already expect or be looking to make some changes, or do you think it takes a little bit more time than that before you start optimizing the mix?
So I would say the learning period for any campaign is anywhere from 10 days to 2 weeks. So that's the initial phase. From there, you should start to see campaigns scaling up. I don't think it's reasonable to make a decision within 2 weeks of launching a campaign. The campaign is still learning, that algorithm is still optimizing, and if we're not feeding enough data, it might take a little bit longer. So generally, I would say at minimum 30 days, looking between 30 and 45 to start really seeing the overall benefit of the dollars going in to what's coming out, right? Because we need to feed that algo to get it a bit smarter into what we're actually looking for, and then for it really to hit its groove and hit its stride. That's generally my POV on that.
Yeah, no, that's great. All right, so I feel like I could squeeze one of mine in at the front of this, but I'll resist and let you start. But you and I I feel like it was a bit of volleyball or something, like back and forth, hitting it over the net as far as things we'd like to see change or maybe rethought as far as paid media strategy and multifamily. So again, I'm trying to behave here, but why don't you share some things that you think would be good for the industry to rethink or test, do a little differently than we've been doing in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I am biased. I've worked with budgets of all sizes, so I would definitely say the more data you feed an algorithm, the better. So is there a way to test revamping how we're targeting folks across the board? Is there a way to do it regionally to where we can allocate a bit more funds across a group of properties that we would see similar clientele in, right? That we can actually aggregate those budgets, give Google a bit more information to then be able to hit those targets across the board and really setting those greater goals. Again, that comes with collaboration with our clients and understanding what their bottom line is. Are they really trying to work on these specific property numbers? Are they trying to get regional numbers up? Are they trying to get their overall lease numbers up? We can definitely work and collaborate with that, but I would err on saying the more data we can feed these algorithms, the better they're going to work for us. And part of that does come with larger budgets. Am I talking hundreds of thousands of dollars? No, but I am talking a little bit more than $2,000 a month to be able to feed that and have more of a regional approach. Would be a really interesting test to see what we could do, and then see how we see the distribution between the properties. There are levers that we can pull to allocate specific amounts of budget to properties within a regional approach as well. And so it is about iterative testing there, right? What do we do to start and how do we iterate off of that to get quantifiable results, right? We want to make sure we're testing in a controlled state, that we're seeing it work, and we're able to apply our learnings to a greater population of properties that we're working with.
I love that. Find a way to provide, inject more data into the campaigns with the obvious, I suppose, of being bigger budgets is going to drive more data. The obvious challenge there, I suppose, especially for third party, is they're dealing with lots of different owners that aren't necessarily wanting to do participate in, I'll call it some type of cooperative test. But there's also plenty of owners that have 5 to 8 buildings that would probably still be able to do what you're suggesting. And many of them are regional in nature, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So again, I know there's nuance to it. I'm not proposing an immediate change by any means, but it's how are we thinking outside the box and how are we evaluating? The biggest thing here is can we poke holes in what we have and what we're testing, right? You bring something to the table, you bring an idea to the table, how can you poke a hole in it? Yeah.
Well, let me piggyback and, shared this one with you, I think a few weeks ago, but on the budgeting thread, point of diminishing returns. So if you were advocating, which you are, for bigger budgets, you're thinking of some creative ways to get there, but if an owner has earmarked, let's say just conveniently $100,000 for a lease up, and I'm saying 12-month budget, why not front load it? If bigger budgets are going to inform better strategy and drive better results, why spread it evenly over the course of those 12 months, which is what we frequently see. It's here's what my LS spend's going to be, and here's what my paid media strategy is going to be. So that's my first question: is why not front load it? And then part 2 is, how would you arrive at a point of diminishing returns? Where it's we could spend $20,000 a month in the first couple of months, but that's too much.
Exactly. So I think this goes back to what we were talking about before, is why aren't we looking at seasonality and how we're allocating budget? One thing I've done in the past when I'm looking at allocating budget across multiple channels, which not only includes just different types of product offerings within Google, but also loops in non-Google things like Bing. It includes, Apple Search if you're running app campaigns. It can include Meta, all different types, TikTok, anything that you could be running on, and seeing for every additional dollar I put in, what is my return? It's a measurement called marginality. It's pretty easy to calculate. And so you're saying as long as I put these additional dollars in, I get anywhere between 50 to 70, 80 cents back on the dollar. Seems like a good return at that point, right?
Sure.
When you're coming down to, okay, I invest more in, say you have PMAX, DemandGen, search, and Meta running. And for search, every additional dollar you get in, you get a return of, 80 cents on the dollar. It's like, yeah, I want to put more money there. Where Meta is actually giving you a return of 30 cents. It's like, ooh, maybe I should be investing more money here right now. And that's really dictated by the market. And so having more of that regular analysis and like fluency within the budgets and saying, okay, right now we're seeing greater return on search, so we should be allocating more budget to search as opposed to Meta, or vice versa, just depending on what's happening in the marketplace. It kind of takes in competition into the fold and allows you to evaluate in real time what is happening in the marketplace to be able to really reallocate those dollars.
Your example there, though, is not feeding like the actual financial data from the PMS. So when you're talking about 80 cents on the dollar, how are you arriving? Because if I were onboarding a new client and we were having that conversation, they may say, I'm comfortable at 30 cents.
Yeah.
But do they really, are we speaking about the same thing?
Yeah. I mean, you definitely have to take in business needs, right? But when I'm talking about this in general, I'm just talking about marginal return within the marketplace, and saying like, if you're putting it in lead cost, for every dollar I get like 0.8 of a lead in as a return, that's another way you can go about calculating this. It doesn't have to be actual dollars on the dollar that you're putting in. So
Sure.
It can be, say for every $10 I put in, I get 0.8 of a lead back. Like that's a valuable return for me. I'm okay with that versus it just kind of shows how competition is coming into play within the actual space that you're in.
I think it's super interesting. And I don't think our clients at this point would know how to respond to that. Meaning, so would you say there's a best practice or kind of a floor for you right now? So in the event that you happen to have this conversation with a paid media strategist or an agency, would you say a good starting point or floor would be 50 cents on this whole marginality, like kind of ROI, or?
Generally, yes. I mean, I would say as a standard across the board, I would say if you're over 50%, you're in a good spot. However, I think it's definitely industry specific because I've seen lower marginal returns in the tech space than I do in the non-for-profit space. So I don't think it's an apples to apples comparison. I would need to look at the data and really see, and that's really what paid marketers do, is like, what can we look at for examples across the board and saying, so this PMC maybe sees this PMC sees this, what's the industry average that we would recommend? And so it would be a little bit of exploratory on our end of figuring out what our recommendation would be. I
love that. You just made my day, if not my week. Not willing to commit to like a kind of a sweeping, like, number or best practice. Peter Tia talks about that, about blood work. And I don't know if I mentioned that to you, but just how too many practitioners, meaning in the medical field, will base treatment plans off of kind of broad benchmarks, and just how nuanced all of us are, of course, individuals, but our blood work, and that you should really be treating that person what's right for them, not necessarily what you've seen in your practice, like in the broader population pool, if you will. So You're saying something similar, which I think is powerful. It's really important for people to understand or hear that.
Yeah, that's the way I think about paid media in general, right? Like, you think about all these AI tools that are coming down, and some people will say, is it going to pull strategists out of the workforce? And for me, it's like, it can do things, but it doesn't have context. And that to me is so important, like the context that goes into how you're optimizing and knowing the business, knowing the needs of your client and those goals is so important. A machine can only do so much. It can't think for you. It can't think about your long-term goals. It can't work through multiple implications. And so for me, that's the way that I think about a strategist is our role will slightly change. Yes, we won't just be like pulling levers and pushing buttons. We'll actually be able to spend more time on that strategy piece as opposed to just working hands on keys and pulling levers, making builds. Like it kind of takes the monotony out of it and gives you more time to have like strategic thinking.
To be a human.
Yeah. To have that human oversight and have that context.
Well, this seriously could be its own podcast. So love that you went there. Let's try to make room for just two more hot takes or things that you think need to be, again, unlearned or rethought relative to paid media strategy and multifamily. And I don't know if this is even, if you want to take the bait on this, but you mentioned Bing a couple times. People made fun of me, I think, in the first few years of Digible because I was constantly bringing up Bing. And it was more just, I'm not the one running the campaigns, haven't been, but trying to be past the point of like, if the cost per click, and I know it doesn't always mean cost per conversion. I mean, that's the very surface vanity metrics in a way, but is so much cheaper on Bing. Why aren't more multifamily marketers putting some budget there? Or why aren't they even starting there if the return on ad spend is inherently lower? And what I heard back, just to kind of set you up, is it's there's a lack of, like, it doesn't have the same kind of, I guess, features. It also doesn't, as you were talking about, the amount of data that Google has. And so if you were only looking at the financial, I'll call it, equation, it's easy to think Bing first or include Bing. But when you actually get down to the campaign results, you often don't see a better outcome. I don't feel like anybody's actually validated that for me because I know Digible has tested some, but not much there. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if this is a good setup for you, if you feel strongly about this, but yeah, what are your thoughts as an expert and in multifamily, the where or if to use Bing?
I've seen hit or miss results on Bing. I think when you're looking at the mammoth that Google is, like everyone goes to Google for search. I think that's kind of probably the leading reason why people aren't on Bing as much, or if they have limited budgets, they just look at the audience on Google being so much wider. And that's probably a reason why. In the same vein.
But can I
you can
challenge you a little bit on that? It's performance-based.
Yeah.
So what difference does it make? Whether there's way more people searching on Google, mm-hmm. What difference does it make if the cost model is performance-based? So I only pay if you click on my ad, whether it's on Bing or on Google. And so
that's the case for search.
Yeah.
But for display, you're paying for impressions.
All right. Well, you pivoted. You're moving us to display. But when it comes to search, that argument for me doesn't, I can't let that one.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I will say, like, Bing is expanding its offerings too. They have a display network now. They are also adding in a Performance Max type campaign. I think it's familiarity too. People are familiar with Google. They know what they get. It also integrates directly with Google Analytics. So they feel very confident in that track back and actually having actionable data there as well. And
so how do you handle the analytics then? That's a great point. Not one that I actually had heard before, but as far as why Google is the direct connection, to analytics. So
a lot of people use Google Analytics or GA4 because it's a free platform. And so I think if you're using internal data and back-end data, it doesn't matter where the lead comes from. If you use correct UTM tracking, you can track what platform it came off of within your CRM system if there's compatibility there. But generally speaking, I think Bing is untapped. There are opportunities there. I would never turn it down from testing, but I would want the data to speak for it, right? So if we're just not seeing the same number of leads or the same quality of leads, that would be something I'm far more interested in than say, I'm going to be more willing to spend more on a quality lead than just trying to hit a lower bottom line for what I'm spending. So that would be something I would be interested in looking into.
Yeah.
And it brings the wider question of how do we qualify a lead? How do we indicate that it's a quality lead? How do we get it to a lead to lease portion at any point? So I think that's more of a longer term discussion and evaluating the traffic that we're bringing in.
Yeah. Well, I didn't quite let you answer, so I'm going to let you answer. Is there something else that you would call out as a big opportunity for this industry to maybe rethink or unlearn relative to paid media strategy?
I think we talked about many of them that we've talked in the past. So the biggest being just rethinking how we're testing. With the smaller testing budgets, it can be really difficult to create actionable insights. So, and actually isolate what is causing the increase in performance. And so I would say really evaluating how we're looking at testing and quantifying wins, and really trying to be strategic with testing programs and saying this is something that could benefit the portfolio overall versus on a property by property basis. And so how are we approaching that to say we're investing these ad dollars and we can see a huge increase in performance across many of our properties versus we're testing on this one platform for this one property and we're seeing wins here. Yes, I do see value in that. But if we're looking to scale in a greater way in the long term, like having those wider and greater testing programs that are more, I guess, incremental, so they build off of each other as well, is really important.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to, I don't know, tease a few others that maybe we'll be able to pick up on another cast, but I would like to see the industry rethink. I'm going to move us a little outside of paid media, but their SEO and the role that it does or doesn't play with paid media, it still feels way too siloed to me. And even here at Digible, we can and will be doing better, I think, there. And thinking of those, trying to almost unite them to be one strategy or brain, if you will. And even ILS, it's like, it seems crazy to me that there's still such a large portion of the budget that, and not that they're wrong to be spending on apartments.com or Zillow. I'm not saying that at all, because they are generating leads, but how many marketers are really uniting ILS and paid media into one strategy?
Yeah.
So, and then another for me is, why not start super prescriptive, like super targeted, and I'm thinking more in the keyword strategy, and then slowly open up until you're getting the sweet spot of quality and quantity. Because I agree with you, and I think most of us want to see better quality, and you're not going to do that by being too broad to start, back to broad, exact, and phrase. So why not have most campaigns start very prescriptive and then eventually expand out?
Yeah, I think, that leads back to where we started talking too, is
that's what I was aiming for. Yeah. A full circle, Melissa.
Being good stewards of dollars, right? And making sure that we're being incremental in the way that we're opening up to and expanding and testing. So that's always a philosophy I have, is like, you have to win the trust of your clients and be good stewards of their investment. And their wins are our wins. So
yeah. Well, I want to definitely have you on again. And just great insights, thought leadership. Loved having you on today. And yeah, I would really want to pick up how you think where the opportunity is relative to ILS and SEO. And maybe we have a couple of your peers on and have a nice little round table.
Yeah, sounds fun.
Cool. Well, thanks so much, Melissa. And we will bring you more deep insights from digital agencies and advertising with the future shows.